Hello and welcome to Basin Safety Academy. This is your safety instructor, Jonathan Greiner. This month, November 2022, we're going to be covering substance abuse, otherwise known as drugs and alcohol, disciplinary programs, and contractor management. These are not OSHA required trainings. They are considered industry best practice trainings. I hope that you enjoyed the training. Please leave your comments at the end and let's get this safety started. All right, so today we have a few training objectives to cover, 5 to be exact. Objective 1, we're going to cover why drugs and alcohol are not allowed in the workplace. I used to say, if I have to cover that too in depth, then maybe you're the reason drugs and alcohol are not allowed in the workplace, but I'm not going to say that in this month's presentation. Objective 2, know why drugs and alcohol can affect you and your coworkers. Also understand the purpose of a disciplinary program, which isn't just to put people out, it's legitimately to help coach people towards success, and we go into that in depth here, as well as learning the steps of a disciplinary program and understanding the management requirements and hiring contractors and subcontractors as far as OSHA and the federal government's concerned, and in general, just the best practices for making sure the people that we hire share our same core values, work ethics, as well as safety concerns.
So drugs and alcohol, just right off the bat, OSHA's general duty clause, which I've talked about in a lot of different training presentations, deals with people having the right to a safe and healthful workplace. So people coming in and essentially, being high or being intoxicated prevent you from having a safe and healthful workplace. Therefore, OSHA does not allow it. So obviously drugs and alcohol have claimed many of the lives of our friends, candidly, not just at work, but just in regular recreational life. And a lot of us know that drugs and alcohol aren't just something people do, especially adults do, just for fun. A lot of times it's masking or hiding something deep down. So I believe that the workplace can be a great place for people to reach out for help because there are programs that are available to them to help them. So the goal of having these programs isn't to, to find the druggie and, beat him up or cast him out or, lose his job. But again, to make sure that we have a safe and healthful workplace for us and our coworkers. So some common drugs out there, marijuana, there's some street names for this. Some people call it ganja. Some other people call it, Mary. What do they call it? Mary Jane. Cocaine, a lot of different I don't want to go through all the street names because this is not going to sound professional. Ecstasy, heroin, roofies, bath salts. Hopefully, you guys are not using roofies at work because you're probably not getting a lot of work done if you're on the roofies. A few other things, legal drugs. So there are legal drugs that are also make the workplace dangerous. So any sort of opiate, for example, pain prescription medications, certain things that affect your moods, even antidepressant drugs can affect workers at the workplace. So all these different things kind of coming together again for us on the safety side and for you trying to make your workplace a safer place. The goal is to, if people are having issues and struggling with addiction, to find them help. That's our goal. So different situations that you will be drug tested at work, just to make this clear if you're unaware. Pre-employment, most of us had to pass a drug test before we got our current job. You may be required to have a random test, so there's something called a consortium out there, and essentially it's a database that picks names at random throughout a company. Sometimes you wonder how random it is. One of our companies, these poor guys, I started to joke about it and say that we won. You won the lottery because you got picked again. And there's this one company, every single quarter, the same 2 people get picked. It's a company of about 10 or 12 people, so they don't have a lot of guys, but these 2 get picked every single time. So we should almost just give them a gift basket, like you've been chosen again, yay, and have a little celebration. The other times you're going to get drug tested post-accident. If you're in any sort of accidents, whether it's vehicular, you drop something, you break something, you cause some serious damage. We just wanted to make sure that, hey, you did that because you're just a regular mess up, not one who's intoxicated. And also reasonable suspicion. And again, if you do have reasonable suspicion about somebody, there's a whole course on this because, some guys, we work with some guys who just, they look rough, and like people are like, man, I think that guy might be on something. And it's like, no, that's just how he looks. So if you do have a reasonable suspicion, there is a process for having reasonable suspicion. But again, the goal is maybe go to that person with HR or supervisor, or if you know them well enough and just say, hey man, is everything all right? Like you don't seem like yourself recently. do you need any help with anything? And try to get them help, because once you get drug tested, the gloves are kind of off from a company's perspective. There's not a lot they can do to help you. So if you are having, trouble with drugs and alcohol or addiction, and it is affecting your work performance, if you're really honest with yourself, definitely reach out and get some help. So obviously at work, there's some discipline possibilities that could come. You could be fired, escorted off the property, potentially suspended, referred to counseling, and again, terminated, or potentially legal prosecution, depending on the extent of the incident or accident that you're involved with. So bottom line, alcohol, bad at the workplace. Again, same thing with illegal drugs. Get some help. This slide kind of covers a lot of things I've already covered, but if you are having trouble, if you're, if you feel the need to have a drink at work, 5 o'clock comes around, you're like, man, I want to start drinking now. I got that, bottle in my truck or something. Again, that's not healthy behavior. There's probably masking something, probably some anxiety or something. If that's the case, definitely reach out and get some help. So alcohol at the workplace, drinking or being under the influence, not okay. If you've had too much to drink the night before and stayed up really late, let's say 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and we've actually had to discipline people and let them go for things like this, to come into work the next day, 6 a.m., and it's still on their breath, that's working under the influence of alcohol. So if you have to call in, the better decision would be not stay up so late, but don't go to work under the influence of alcohol ever. Same thing with drugs. It puts everyone at risk. So again, if you're not sober, stay home, take a sick day. I absolutely do not operate heavy equipment while under the influence of alcohol. This is where criminal prosecutions can start to come, especially if there's an accident involving heavy equipment. Even if no one got hurt, that can really have a lot of impact. So again, getting help. How do you get help? Well, it's pretty straightforward. There's most of our insurance programs and workman's comp in North Dakota has something called an EAP, or an employee assistance program. This is designed to help people. There's some regularly scheduled meetings. And I'm not saying these EAPs are going to tell you something you've never heard before. Like it's, this incredible new source of information. But sometimes being reminded and being able to just talk things through with somebody can make a big difference. So they're designed to help people with addiction, or people who are having other struggles. Contact your supervisor or human resource person if you feel like you need to talk to an EAP. That's what they're designed for. And candidly, that money comes out of your check every month. So asking for help is probably one of the most challenging things a human being can do in life, especially at work. So I recognize the difficulty in this. But again, if you're having issues, you're having addiction problems, or maybe you've been clean for a while and you're struggling to maybe go back and backslide to where you've been in the past, definitely reach out, find someone to help you. Don't go back into that world again. All right, some real life statistics here. So North Dakota in 2019, those are the newest stats we have. They're about 2 years behind on the North Dakota statistics. Just believe it or not, there's 2 accidents involving alcohol every 24 hours. So every 12 hours there's 1, every 24 there's 2 accidents. And every 9 days an alcohol-related fatality occurs while somebody's driving in North Dakota. North Dakota doesn't seem like a place where a lot of that would be happening, but those are some significant statistics. So if you look at the the kind of stats here, about 38, which is an improvement from 4 years ago. Total fatal crashes, fatalities was 43. So if you look at that, 38 crashes, 43 fatalities. That's a bad deal. That means that there's other people in the vehicle that have died, and 402 injuries. So still a lot of injuries involving people under the influence of alcohol. So that's all I got for drugs and alcohol. Again, if you need help, seek it. If you think somebody may be, using at work that, again, so there's this guy, he works with me. He has permanent dark circles under his eyes. And, we've hired guys who are like, man, I think something might be wrong with that guy. And it's like, no, that's how he looks. He's looked that way since he was in high school. I don't get it. Maybe he has an iron deficiency. I don't know, but he's fine. But if it's like, hey, that guy's on drugs, let's get him. You have to have some reasonable suspicion. And again, there's it's about a 4-hour course on this of what the telltale signs are of somebody that's using drugs or alcohol. So if you feel like there may be somebody that has that, and you want to feel like you're knowledgeable enough to approach that, there are courses available to do that. And candidly, especially in the DOT world, that is a requirement for all supervisors. All right. Disciplinary program. So it kind of leads in pretty well to this topic. I'm going to go through this topic pretty quickly as well because it's something we're all pretty familiar with. But I really want to talk about the heart behind disciplinary programs as well as what the program is. So a disciplinary program is essentially designed to ensure, again, that everyone has a healthy and safe work environment. So, this isn't, just about safety. There's other reasons for disciplinary program. Obviously, if somebody's late to work consistently, if people are treating others poorly, or just inefficient, significantly inefficient. Like, oh man, this job should have taken you 20 minutes and it take you 4 hours. Those may be reasons for discipline as well, but I'm going to focus pretty heavily on the safety side. A couple other things, they're not designed to just get workers in trouble, but the goal is to provide some guidance for workers. So if they are having performance issues, they can get better. They can have this serious sit down where they're like, oh, okay, this isn't just somebody's opinion about my work performance. This is like serious. This is a real issue here. And the goal of an effective program is really discourage employees from behaving in a manner that would put themselves or others at risk, and also make sure that efficiency is top notch, that we're really driving for excellence. And one of the most challenging systems to implement is the disciplinary program, because for a leader in the organization, that starting down this process affects somebody's livelihood or potentially affects somebody's livelihood. And in today's market where workers are really hard to come by, you want to make sure you do it in the right way so that you're not just, being pejorative and pushing someone down just because you can, because you have the authority, but it's done in a way that's really designed to coach them. Now, I'm not saying we give everyone trophies, and if somebody really messed up, you try to make them feel good about it. I'm not saying that. In fact, the statistics show that being direct and straightforward in these instances is a lot better than kind of candy coating it and saying, oh, well, you're a pretty good guy, but, you really are terrible at your job. No, you want to just be straight up like, hey, Billy, you're really not doing a great job, but we want to help you get better, versus, again, trying to make them feel good about not doing a good job. So some different reasons for implementing your disciplinary program. Safety violations is a big one, as is punctuality, fighting or being aggressive, obviously violence, harassment, sexual assaults. These are all reasons for the disciplinary program. Bullying, insubordination, theft, or drugs and alcohol on the job. All these are things that if you do them, you will potentially and very likely be brought through the disciplinary program. If you want to know more about your disciplinary program, don't do these things in order to experience the disciplinary program. Probably just read the book, because your company will have a disciplinary program in your safety manual. So I included a quote on this slide from a guy by the name of Jocko Williams. I've also included a link to his audiobook, a book called Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. Great book. We read this as an organization, changed a lot of things about the way that we approach our disciplinary program. But what he says here in one part of the book is the most fundamental and important truths at the heart of extreme ownership, which is really owning everything. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And in this book, there's an event essentially in the U.S. Navy SEALs training where they take these boats, right? They're big, kind of inflatable rafts, but they're heavy, and they race with them on top of their heads. So they're a 9-man boat. 9-man boat. But I think only 6 of them carry it. So you got 6 guys running through the ocean onto the sand beach and then down the beach across the finish line. And there's about 5 or 6 different teams. Each one is numbered, each boat is numbered, and you race. And if you win the race, you get to sit out the next heat, and then everyone else has to, run it again. So obviously you're incentivized to win because running through the sand and water is difficult, especially as a team, especially with a heavy thing on top of you that you're carrying above your head. So there was this instance in the book where there was one team that was just kicking butt. I mean, they won every single heat just over and over and over again. And so they wanted to test something. So they said, okay. And then there were some guys complaining, you put me with the leaders of the groups. Hey, you put me with a bad team. These guys suck. And they're screaming and they're yelling and you guys are pieces of garbage and you can't, your grandma could go faster. I mean, just really digging into their guys. And so what the squad leader did was he switched up the teams. He changed out the leader. So he took the leader from the really good team and put it with the worst team, and then took the leader from the worst team and put him with the best team. And wouldn't you know it, the team with and these are, guys training for U.S. Navy SEALs, like none of them are just losers. They're all in fantastic shape, some of the best athletic builds and training in the world, on the planet. And the last team turned around and started winning first again. And that other guy, he was still in second or third because he had a really good team that had kind of won a few times, so they knew what they were doing. But that other guy was able to bring his team up to first place. And the question is, how do you do that? A lot of times leaders will blame the guys underneath them. So the challenge here I'm giving to everybody as far as this disciplinary program is if your team is really failing, whether it's one person or the whole team, rather than just looking at them and their flaws, the first thing I challenge you to do is look at yourself. And as a leader myself, it can be challenging, painful, humbling, and depressing to look at yourself and say, hey, these guys are failing. What can I do to improve to make sure that they don't fail? And that means changing sometimes, changing your approach, changing the way you talk to your guys, changing the way that you encourage them, etc. And it's difficult to do, and that's why excellence is very rarely seen in the world. So discipline and encouragement motivates employees who are not responding to coaching or direction to the seriousness of their decision. You probably already read through this. It encourages a safe and healthy workplace, motivates employees to not lose their employment and financial security, which is important, and ultimately removes employees who don't meet expectations, company values, or team goals. Now, in today's market, 2021, November 2021, I want to impart the importance of being a good team person. Right now, there is more opportunity for advancement than has ever been seen on the planet in this country. That was a little bit awkward, but the reality is that there's such a shortage of workers and good leaders, and if you step up and really help build your team and coach your guys and encourage them towards excellence, there is really no limit for you. All right, the process of the disciplinary program. So the first thing we encourage, and it's going to be in a lot of your programs, is you remind people. You verbally tell them, "Hey, man, like you were late again today. That we got to stop doing that." Then you have the verbal warning, like, "Okay, for real, dude. Like you're late again. Stop it." Then there's a written warning. Hey, here's a documentation of you being late. You're continuing to be late. Then there's a suspension, typically without pay, which is the final step before termination, and then a termination. Now, being late, I mean, some guys, it's just their not time-oriented, and maybe this isn't the kind of thing that your team is struggling with, but that's just an example. But there may be other things, and sometimes we skip things, right? We'll, remind them one time, and then they don't do it, and then we don't really seriously, because we're like, we told them one time, why do I got to tell them again? And then we pass the written warning, and then we even pass suspension. We're just like, we got to fire this guy. I told him one time, he keeps doing it, we got to fire him. And that's one way to do it. But the other question I ask my team is, hey, have we really coached this guy? Have we really imparted the seriousness of the thing he's doing and made him understand that? Because sometimes it's just a miscommunication of expectations, which again is us looking at ourselves. Now, if a guy's consistently putting people, especially in a safety aspect, at risk, that's something that you really want to take seriously. I'm not saying you soft blow that one, but for the most part, if people are doing things that are incongruent with your values, but maybe need an adjustment, I really encourage trying to coach them through the process before we just start throwing out warnings, or start throwing out written documentation. But not a bad idea to send a text to your supervisor or HR when those things happen. All right, verbal warning, really, again, something straight to the point. Hey, this is for real. Like, dude, I don't want to have to tell you this again. Here's the next step if you do this thing again. So the people are kind of prepared. The expectation is set. It's been communicated to them. No one likes to hear this. They may be belligerent at that moment. But again, this is the first step, is the verbal warning. Then comes the written warning, where we document specifically what happened. And very importantly, not just, hey, you messed up, but also, this is what we want you to do, and this will be the next step after this. So this usually, has, a person that signs it, a timeline for improvement, etc. And every company's going to do this a little bit differently. It doesn't have to be 30 pages. It can be a paragraph. It can be a few sentences. It should clearly describe the behavior that's incongruent with what you want and the steps to improvement. Then obviously we have suspension. So in a suspension situation, they pack their bags, right? They go home, think about what they've done. Well, I really don't like to put it that way, but the reality is, this has hit the point where we're sending you home. Like, we value you more at home right now than we do actually working for us, because you consistently do this thing. Hopefully for most people, this is enough of a wake-up call that we never have to get to the next step. Now, again, with this, just like the written warning, it's documented what it's for, the number of times that this has happened, maybe even some dates of when this has happened and why the suspension is occurring. And then the next step is termination. So at this stage, it's pretty much like, hey, we can't do this anymore. We're over it. We're done trying with you. Like you've hit that point. So the reason that a lot of this stuff needs to be done in the certain process is, even though we are a right to work state, if you value people, then you want them to have a chance to improve. But secondly, for a legal perspective, you want to make sure that like what you're doing, because it does affect people's livelihood and their future, that what you're doing is matches up with the seriousness of the action of whatever it is. So yelling and belittling people, not effective. You don't want to have favoritism where this person can get away with it, but that person can't because we don't like this person. It really, emotion should have nothing to do with it. It just needs to be based on the facts. So kind of getting close to wrapping this up here. Obviously, certain behaviors are more serious than others, which I've already touched on. And some that are illegal, I mean, maybe there's not a 5-step. I mean, if somebody steals from you, for example, it might not be like, all right, Billy, you shouldn't steal, right? That's your verbal warning. That may be the end of it, right? The cops are called. It's a serious deal, investigation, the whole nine. And other things, maybe, example, tardiness, may be something that you kind of follow those steps on. So there's no like rule that things have to be done a certain way. It really should depend on the seriousness of the issue. And in some things, for example, drugs and alcohol, violence, harassment, sexual harassment, etc., a lot of us do have a zero tolerance policy for that. That's a good thing. We do not want people to, feel unsafe at work or feel like coming to work is a dangerous place for them. And yes, these rules have changed. What used to be okay in certain instances is no longer okay. And that's not a terrible thing. We're improving it as in the way that we relate to people. But again, you want work to be a place where people come and, for the most part, as much as you possibly can, feel like, they're with people they can trust. So a good disciplinary program keeps everybody at the job, keeps everyone at the job safe, mentally and physically. If you see something that's wild, just doesn't really fit, again, with your values, report those to your supervisor. You want to know your expectations, and if you're in a leadership position, set those expectations very clearly. All right, so moving into harassment a little bit. So there are some harassment laws out there. There's the Title VII law. We have courts, we have state law, we have equal employment opportunity, etc. So this really has a lot to do with not discriminating against people because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, because of their what's the word I'm looking for? Their ethnicity, their race, their background, what jobs they've had before, even if they've had a criminal record. We don't want to hold things against people, especially things that are just, this is who this person is. If you're going to hold people accountable, it should be for something, again, that is against your company's values, your code of conduct, your ethics, etc. Those are the kind of things that we want to, point to and focus on improving, not, things that are just who that person is. And trust me, there's people that I do not like that I work with. Just part of the game, right? Doesn't mean they got to know about it. Doesn't mean I need to treat them differently. You can still treat people with respect, even if you don't want to, have a picnic with them and go out to brunch. All right. So a few key points to remember here. Harassment of any kind is prohibited by law, workplace policy. It involves more than physical conduct. It can also be verbal or visual. This can be, again, treating people in a way that diminishes trust. And if you broaden the definition of harassment to that, it can be pretty broad. But again, if you're in a position especially of influence or authority, you want to make sure that you're creating an atmosphere of trust. You have the power to help prevent it. Obviously, all of us do. If someone else is being harassed, I encourage you being an advocate. Stick up for each other. Be like, hey, man, don't treat my boy like that or my gal like that. Like me, I want you to show this person more respect. And sometimes that will, rise things to the top faster. We don't want to upset the apple cart typically, but sometimes the apple cart needs to be upset if on the other end, or the opposite reality would be somebody being treated poorly. So wrapping this up, these couple topics before we go into our final one. Don't be under the influence of alcohol or drugs at work. Pretty straightforward. If someone is, report them to the supervisor. Disciplinary programs are there to protect you. So, obviously we want to know our company's expectations. If we don't know them, find them out. And don't be afraid to just ask your supervisor, hey man, what would it mean for me to be excellent at this position in your eyes? And if the guy's like, you never can be, maybe that's not a great place to work. But if he's like, here's what I want you to do, A, B, C, go do those things. Go do A, B, and C and become an excellent employee. Treat other team members with respect. Again, building that atmosphere of trust. And when your company has rules, just follow them. So not a lot of ways to make that exciting. Hopefully you're still with me here. Like I said, I'm moving through it pretty quickly, but we're going to go into our last topic here, contractor and subcontractor management. So contractors really refers to an individual or company who enters into an agreement, either written or orally, with a company to carry out services. So one question I have for you is, who are your high-risk contractors? So for us, for example, every once in a while, we need to bring in new power to a certain part of the shop, or increase our power for a new type of tool or compressor that we have. So we bring in electricians. Those are probably our highest risk contractors. Or we need some hydrovac work done for a fire suppression system, or maybe something failed, so we need to bring in a hydrovac company. These are our high risk contractors. So I want you to think about who your high risk contractors are, and then we're going to talk about what your requirements are for managing them. So as far as the hiring client contractor relationship, our health and safety requirements when a contractor comes to our shop, they need to follow ours or theirs, whichever are most stringent, as long as all of them meet the federal laws. So if you hire on contractors, here's some of their responsibilities. So obviously they need to follow OSHA. They need to protect and ensure the health and safety of their employees, other people at the work site, even if they're not their employees, and obviously members of the public who may be affected by the work. So for example, I hire the electricians, and I don't tell them that I jerry-rigged some weird kind of power thing that could potentially electrocute them because I bypassed the turn-off switch and the circuit breaker. I would be responsible to tell them that, and if I didn't, then I would be liable, even though they're a contractor and not my employee. But as far as the contractor is concerned, what they're responsible to do is, again, make sure that their people are kept safe and provide a safe workplace for their people. That includes training, making sure that their people are trained. And certain contractors you hire, you just wonder what kind of training their guys have been through. If you find yourself in that position where you're wondering, hey, this guy is obviously not very good at this job, you can and should inquire about that with your contractor. Be like, hey man, this guy does not know what he's doing. Like, I don't feel safe. We don't feel safe with this guy around. Maybe we need to put him through some more training before we bring him back to site. So managing the health and safety of contractors, we do have some responsibilities as owners and clients, and then our clients and the owners of the companies that contract us, if we're contracted workers, have some responsibilities as well. So there are corporate safety pre-qualification processes that a lot of us are having, that we have to go through, and then we have to put our contractors through to make sure that we actually do train our people, that we have the right insurance, that we have the right equipment, that we have a standard for inspection of equipment, etc. We want to define the scope of the work for that contractor, perform a risk assessment with the contractor saying, hey, what are the risks of this job? Verify contractors are trained and qualified to do the tasks again, and stop work and maintain authority on site if we see something that doesn't look right. So the contractors, what are they responsible to do? They're responsible to obviously carry out the work in a safe manner, provide qualified and trained individuals, follow their own HSE program, follow their requirements, and report incidents and accidents immediately to the customer. So health and safety policy, they need to have one of those. Sometimes it'll be hours reporting, training programs, job site and task safety evaluations, including JSAs, permits, etc., and then obviously provide the PPE and correct tools and equipment for the job. So if the guys don't have hard hats or fall harnesses or fire extinguishers, if they need those things, then the contractor needs to be providing those. So responsibility and accountability, this really comes down to what's documented, candidly. So a documented risk assessment and safe system of work for the task in question is important. A documented program for regular inspections of all plant and equipment, whatever it is, they need to be inspecting that they're doing things correctly, and then again, training their workers. PPE, kind of already went over that, but making sure that they, in the oil and gas industry, the renewable energy industry, electrical industry, all these different areas, typically our PPE is compulsory, right? You have a hard hat, get your safety glasses, get your gas monitor, your FR clothing, your safety-toed boots. Pretty straight up. Gloves of different kinds depending on what type of work you're doing. But sometimes you need additional equipment, and there needs to be a system in place to determine whether or not the job you're doing needs additional equipment. And that's where you have, things called PPE assessments, where you're determining if it's actually the right equipment for what you're doing. And then lastly, incident reporting and investigation. So the contractors you hire, or if you're a contractor, you need to have some system for reporting incidents in a timely manner. Nobody likes to find out that a week ago, Billy fell off the ladder and he's been in the hospital ever since. That needs to be like that day. And sometimes they're going to want you to have a report within 24 hours, kind of outlining what you know, what happened, who was involved, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so some qualities that add value. If you are a contractor and you're working for an operator, what can you do? Document your risk assessment and share it with a customer, even if they didn't ask for it. Let them know, hey, we evaluated a workplace and this is what we found. A good record of occupational health and safety performance in work of a similar nature. And then also, contractors, we need to be evaluated based on a specific set of safety requirements. This is kind of one of my bones I like to pick with the industry because, safety is like super, super important, and we stress it and we stress it and we stress it. But a lot of times contractors get picked because of price, and it doesn't matter what, quality metrics or safety metrics a company has. They just kind of look past all that and say, hey, what's your bottom dollar? That's our ultimate deciding factor. It's a little frustrating to me as a safety professional, obviously doing this for a long time, because I feel like if we're doing these things, they should have some value to the organization. But anyway, I digress. So when we go to work on site, a few things that we want to ensure that we're doing is that we're completing those risk assessments, turning them in, evaluating the processes that we're doing and the PPE that we need to do it, make sure that's documented and kind of how we came to those conclusions, and then provide any feedback like this job's going well, this job's not going so well, and then request information about potential improvements from the customer. When contractors succeed, if you have contractors, identify them who performs a great job, learn from them to assist other contractors, and because I'm a contractor, just putting this out there, take us to lunch, just saying, or whatever you want to do, give them an attaboy, whatever it is. And if they fail, so this does happen from time to time, identify those who aren't following the safety, who aren't meeting, your safety requirements or following expectations, create improvement action items, meet with them to discuss those action items, and then hold them accountable through evaluation. These are kind of our important steps to doing that. So keeping a check as the process is going and you're working with that subcontractor. Sometimes we just hire them and say, hey, you're paid to do this job, get her done. But it's a good idea to kind of keep following up and find out if the job's going as planned. Are they following their safety and health requirements? Are there any incidents? Why are there any incidents? And are there any special arrangements that you as the owner client can put in place to help them to succeed? And then obviously I like, as I mentioned in the leadership piece earlier, it's good to have a self-evaluation. Do you follow the same requirements that you have your contractors required to follow? Are your company policies being followed in the field? And then obviously, setting an example in quality and safety in the field for your contractors as well as your employees. All right, the next slide is going to wrap this up. The last thing you want to do is review the work. Once the job's been completed, good idea to do a little debrief. How this job go? What could we do better? What should we keep doing? What was great? Review the outcomes and achievements, verification of the adequacy of the procedures in place. Hey, what do we need to change or adjust? Amendment or addition of the procedures if necessary. Recording and rating the overall performance of the contractor against established criteria. Really, hey, this is what we expected. This is what happened. And then lastly, give them an opportunity to provide feedback to you in a kind of a non-confrontational way where you're asking for it rather than just waiting for them to say it and then kind of pushing back on them. Sometimes there's a financial element to this which can make it complicated. But again, having that feedback will always help you. You got to think 5-10 years down the road. Like if we're having problems on this job with this contractor, how do we make sure that doesn't happen again? Sometimes getting positive feedback from your contractor group will give you the ability to do that. All right, so we went through a lot of stuff today. As I mentioned, we're going to go through it pretty quick. So if you have any questions or something wasn't clear, or you just want to know more information, feel free to email me. We're at the bottom of this of the quiz here. You can see my email there. You can email me directly. A lot of you guys give me great feedback. I appreciate that. I really appreciate all the participants in the training. And that's it for November, and we'll see you next month.